many ways we can set up our quality on our stream, but there are a few things we should know before doing that. Now, OBS gives us an option to go the simple route. So if I go into my settings and click the output tab, the output right now is on simple mode, so I can decide a bitrate. In the case of Twitch, the maximum is 6,000. I can change that, and I can check what encoder I want. If I want to encode on my CPU, if I want NVENC, if I have an NVIDIA card, or AMF if I have an AMD card. I can also enable advanced encoder settings if I want to decide. So for NVENC, I can choose these options, and for software, I can choose a profile, or I can let OBS do its thing. As far as recording goes, we can decide the recording path. Generate file name without space will not include a space for our recording name. The recording quality, we can decide if it's the same as stream or different. If we choose that it's a different type of recording quality, then we'll have to use double the resources because it has to stream and record at different settings. So keep that in mind. The recording format, we have a few options. If we do MP4, we'll get this warning, same for MOV, which will be unrecoverable. If OBS quits or anything happens, then we cannot recover the video. I would suggest using MKV. MKV is very versatile, and later you can remux it or re-encode it or do whatever you want with it. MKV is fine. And I can enable the replay buffer here. So if I enable the replay buffer, we can choose the maximum replay time, so 20 seconds. It will estimate how much RAM it's going to use. And it says make sure to set a hotkey for the replay buffer in the hotkey section. As you can see, as we increase the maximum replay time with seconds, the estimated memory usage just keeps going up. So if we do something ridiculous like 5 minutes, so 600 seconds, that's an extra 200 megs of RAM. If we click apply there, we can see that start replay buffer, which we discussed in a previous video, comes up there. We'll turn that off. We have custom muxer settings if we want to put custom settings here. Don't look at custom settings yet. We might get into custom settings in the future. You don't need them for now. Just think of this as it is the simplest way to stream and record. We can also go into the advanced output mode where we get different options and tabs now. And now the audio track comes in. So recording also has audio tracks and streaming has audio tracks. When we were on audio, we could decide which source goes to which track. So say I want just the recording to have, say, no stream alerts on it. As far as audio goes, I could just put the track, the audio track from the audio to a specific one and say, I only want the desktop audio to be on 3, 4, 5, and 6. So if streaming is picking up just one, it won't pick this sound up. If I decide I want this just on 1, for instance, then it will only go to 1. In streaming, we can only choose one track because that's what we have. So if we go back to settings, in streaming, we only get to choose one track. In recording, we can choose multiple tracks. And we'll get a recommendation here that FLV does not support multiple tracks per recording. MKV does, so we can leave it as MKV. We'll leave it at 1 for the sake of it. No need to complicate it, but the feature is there and it's usable. As far as encoder goes here, you will only see these 3 if you have an NVIDIA card. This is an extra software which we'll look at later. But we have X264, which is your CPU, and we get a set of options here. Constant bitrate, CBR, is what's usually recommended. Adaptive bitrate will change. Variable bitrate will change within a range. And the rate factor here will not be based on a bitrate, but just on the quality. For streaming, we need CBR, constant bitrate. This will deliver a constant level of quality to the online stream servers, and this is preferable. In the case of Twitch, maximum is 6,000 here. We'll leave the keyframe intervals at 0. OBS will automatically detect what keyframes it needs to send. And here we have our CPU preset. Ultra fast to placebo. We don't need placebo, we don't need very slow, we don't need slower, maybe slow. Ultra fast and super fast, I would skip. Now the fastest it goes the less quality you'll have, especially in high movement situations. Ultra fast and super fast have a particular way they look. It looks very raw and it's a bit different, so I wouldn't use those. So I'd go very fast at the minimum, and if you can go to slow, go to slow. This may not be the case for most people. Medium is just fine for streaming. You don't need to go all the way to slow. The medium looks quite good. And fast, faster, and very fast. Depends how many resources you have. So test this out, but the slower you go, the more CPU you're going to use. If your CPU is a bit restricted and you cannot use this, if you have an NVIDIA GPU, you have the option of choosing NVENC, which we'll go into. We have our profile here. I usually go for main or high. This depends on the provider. Twitch allows main and high just fine. Tune we won't be touching, we don't need to. And X264 options we won't be doing anyway. There are a lot of things we can do to this, a lot of ways we can change it, but for the sake of just being simple, we don't need to do that. We'll have a look at the options in a later video. When we switch to NVENC, and we skipped, apologies, we've skipped the rescale output. This means that if our canvas, which we set in the beginning, is 1920 here, actually, sorry, if our resolution here is 1280 by 720, this is what will be outputted. So when we select this, this is what's being determined here. So if I rescale, I'm bringing 720, the default, back up to full HD. And as you can see, it removed it because it only detects the maximum resolution, which is set here in the scaled resolution. That rescale is only there. Keep in mind that this uses extra CPU to rescale, so you may need to be careful with this. We have the option here for streaming for two things. Well, really it's one thing. So if we do 1080p here, and we don't want to stream in 1080p, but we want to record at 1080p. So what we do is we leave that as is, we go to stream, to output, we rescale, and we'll say, okay, I want to rescale to that, to 720p. So our recording is 1920 by 1080. If I choose something else, it's 1920 by 1080, and the stream is 720p. So I can do different scaling for both of them. If I do 720p here, then that means both of them will be at a maximum of 720p. If you don't need streaming and recording, feel free to do it from just here. This is the better way for it to work, but if you need both, you can do it from the output screen. If we go into NVENC, so we have this, which is the old, and then there's the new one. The new one will work better on the newer NVIDIA cards. It's essentially the same sort of... It essentially has the same options. There are only a few differences, like the look ahead and psycho visual tuning. You can leave it as default. You can choose a bitrate and a preset. Quality works just fine, but remember that a strong CPU at medium will deliver a better result. But this doesn't affect your gameplay if you do it on NVENC. It's like using Shadow Play, but for streaming. So if you don't have many CPU resources, feel free to use your GPU. As far as recording goes, we have different types. If we want custom output to FFmpeg, if you know FFmpeg, then you can do that. If you don't, and we're not getting into that, we can go to standard. We choose the recording path, generate file name without space, as we had earlier, recording format, which we touched upon, and audio tracks as well. We can choose the encoders. You can see a few extra ones here because I added a few with one of the OBS tools. You can use the stream encoder to have the exact same settings here. And remember that when you do this, then you don't need to use double the resources because it's exactly the same output. So if you want your recording to look exactly as the stream, just use the stream encoder. That works just fine. If you want something more advanced, you can choose another profile and you'll get different options for recording. Actually, this you won't be able to see that. You'll get the same. I clicked the wrong one, which is added. This gives more features. That's why I added them, and we'll look at them in the advanced setup. You get roughly the same options. Even for X264, you should get the same. Exactly the same settings. And you can go into different settings here. So if you don't want to, you want constant rate factor for the quality, you can do that instead of the bitrate. But typically, if you want to go live, I'll do that. I'll suggest 5000, for instance. Leave the preset at quality, profile high. And you could tick these. It will give you an option. So dynamic B-frames, it will be at the cost of increased GPU. If you have a 1080 Ti, this is just fine. Even this ticked on is just fine. And let's keep in mind when deciding what bitrate you want to use, make sure what your upload speed is. So how do we calculate what we want to put this as our maximum? Let's have a look. So I'm going to open up a browser here with speedtest.net. And I'll check my speed. Now, as you can see, we have two values. 3 rather, because we have our ping, but let's disregard the ping for now. We have our download rate and our upload rate. Now, I have 20 megs of upload here, almost 21, but I cannot use them all because Twitch, for instance, says maximum of 6 megabits. Some people use up to 8, but any more than that, the ingest servers won't like. In the case of me having more upload than I need, in that case, I will just set it up as if I want to 6000. But if I have less than the 6000, I need to think on how to set it up. If I have 5 megabit, that means I have 5000 available for me to use as bitrate. But should I? The answer is no. If you saturate all your upload speed for your stream, then you will lag the stream because you'll be constantly competing for the upload with any other source, including games, and you'll lag the games as well. So what you need to do is keep roughly 10% extra above what you're streaming with. So if you have 5 megabits of upload, you should be streaming at 4500 maximum. Now this should be a bit less because we have audio to consider, which has a bit rate as well. So think about keeping 10% extra overhead for any games you might play. If there's anyone else doing anything in the house, if you stream at your maximum upload speed, you're going to lag the connection completely. So that might be a bit of an issue. So go down just a bit. 10% is enough. Me streaming at 4000 is fine for 720p. It's more than excellent for 720p 60 fps. If it's 30, you can go lower. So don't worry too much about that. We will actually check a few options we can and how to actually determine what speed we should use. But as a guideline, keep in mind that you have to go about 10% less than your upload capacity if your upload speed is less than the maximum accepted by the provider. Or rather, not the provider, the stream provider, not your internet provider. It's the stream provider. In my case, Twitch. As we go into audio here, we get audio bit rates for every track. So if I want one of the tracks to be very high quality, I'll do 320. If all the sources that are in track 1 are also in track 2, I can choose, for instance, to record at 320 bitrate audio and stream on track 1, which is 160. You don't need more than 160 to stream. I don't think Twitch actually allows more than 160 as far as the audio bitrate goes. So feel free to leave it like that. But if you want higher quality for recording, drop one of the other tracks to a higher bitrate and record using that track. We also have our replay buffer here, which enables the replay buffer. This is exactly the same as it was in the simple mode, but it also allows a maximum memory. So as it says here, it cannot estimate memory usage. Please set maximum memory limit. So it will either go the maximum replay time or the maximum memory. So say you want only 1 gig of RAM to be used for that. It will just work with your 1 gig of RAM without worrying that it's going to use more RAM than you tell it to. And this, of course, allows you to have better stability when running the application. If you found this tutorial helpful, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, leave any comments in the comment section, and check out the links in the description. In the next video, we'll be talking about the audio settings tab. See you in the next one.